reasonable assumptions. And yet that information did go into the report. Do you think that were the decisions that were made afterwards or as a result of the report, do you think the decisions were already made?
The video does not show exactly where it hit. It hit the left wing, but where exactly on the left wing? What material did it hit? Tiles? Carbon panels on the front of the wing where it's very hard and brittle? Did it hit a landing gear door? We don't know. The image is one angle. We cannot determine that. All we know is it hits a cloud of particles, white particles emerges in the video.
I'd like to stop here now and ask you about, at this moment, how you describe the safety culture. Because I think we have a safety culture before the accident and after the accident, right? Hello, everyone. Welcome to Headline Podcast. Headline Podcast is a place to have honest and insightful conversations. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Megan Tranter. Megan, are you as excited as I am about talking with our special guest, Rodney Rocha from NASA today?
Honestly, I never thought we'd be able to talk to a person like Rodney, so I'm very grateful that he's agreed to talk to us, and I'm sure we're going to have a great chat today. So
Excellent.
Much good stuff and interesting stuff to talk about.
Rodney Rocha from NASA. So he is retired, but he worked at NASA for 52 years as a chief engineer. Welcome, Rodney.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and to be of worth or have value for what my experience taught.
Rodney, I watched your presentation on psychological safety in California, in Berkeley, in the SOT workshop. I was very inspired by you connect theory and practice in regards to the Columbia Shuttle accident. Your communication was clear and deep. Although this accident took place more than 22 years ago, psychological safety continues to be an important and very necessary theme. So, Rodney, I'm going with my first question for you. What is this, and how do you connect it with your journey at NASA?
I did not know that ahead of time. I thought in my NASA career, especially early career, this is a highly technical organization. Everybody's objective. Later, I would learn that project managers, program managers, and others worry about things that I did not worry about, or they weren't part of my job, that it's cost and schedule and managing other things, budgets, buying equipment and all that. I learned that when I entered, as I gained experience in seniority, we had to communicate and listen to such things too. I also saw how others, sometimes they were more senior engineers than I was or older, how they would be intimidated by that atmosphere, or they might experience being reprimanded, or in the old days being the 70s, 80s, and somewhat into the 90s, name calling. If a manager got angry or aggressive or even bullying, they could just start shouting or beat down an engineer's message or make it a personal attack. And that was very disconcerting to see. That is, for the most part, gone now from the NASA organization. In fact, I suspect that was all over corporate America, not just NASA, like starting in the 70s and into the 80s and so on. That was upsetting to see that could happen. And that is fear, anxiety, fear of one's losing your job or being reassigned, or if I goof up, my own manager or supervisor is going to remove me from this project and reassign me somewhere else. but also other engineers thinking they know the rule. They thought they know this is how you got to handle that manager. So every manager was different that acted in that ugly way. You got to do this. Oh, or they would find excuses for them. Like, well, that manager just wants to know that you know what you're talking about. So he or she has a right to reprimand you or call you out and embarrass you. And they want to see how you push back. I thought, that doesn't sound right, because some people can do that. They can fight back. They can throw it right back. They're that confident. But not everybody's that way. They want to retreat. They get scared. They get very uncomfortable. They just want to leave the room. So if that happens, if you lose people like that, you've lost valuable information. The company's lost valuable information through fear and intimidation.
Rodney, you know, in the intro, I was saying I'm so happy that you're here and that we're having this conversation. And I never thought we would, or I'd get to talk to someone like you. You know, if we take us back to February of 2003, you were actually there, weren't you? You know, when the Columbia incident happened. And can you sort of take us through maybe a little bit what happened, only for those who perhaps don't have the same number of years under their belt that the three of us have here? Because it's, you know, a really fascinating story, a sad story, but also so many lessons that we can learn as well.
It's a huge story and it would take hours and hours, but I'm trying to condense it right now. At that time, I was a division chief engineer, meaning for my organization, it was mostly concerned with structures, windows, landing gear, parachutes, tiles, the thermal protection systems. That was my organization. As a chief engineer, I was to have overview of all of those things, including how our NASA contractors, the Boeing Company and the United Space Alliance, were handling these things. We were also in the middle of shuttle privatization. That was going to cause more problems that I would learn later. Our shuttle program, at the behest of NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., said, we've run the space shuttle program with engineers knowing all the details, hands-on, in-depth. We need to get out of that. So we're going to turn that over to two major companies. We were in the middle of that. A lot of engineers, not just me, were very uncomfortable with that. Very uncomfortable. I said, the contractors are profit-oriented. They won't be as diligent about technical safety and penetration of projects, because they want their contractor awards. They want the bonus awards for delivering on time. They want to hurry it up. We thought that could be dangerous. Some of our engineers wrote emails and memos about that. But the shuttle management was under orders. We're going to privatize one day. And my boss came back from a meeting and he had a quote from one of the shuttle managers: unclench your fists from the shuttle. Let it go. Got to let it go. So it wasn't finished yet, the conversion, but we were in the middle of that. So I think that is a key factor where our own management was under pressure. Let go. Trust the contractor more, what they say. So, all right, let's go back. January 16th, 2003, the shuttle launches. I don't think I watched it on television. I'd watched many, many shuttle launches on television. I watched 5 of them in person and so on. They were getting routine enough where I don't have to watch this one. But that was what they call day one, flight day one. Flight day 2, the next day, I got a phone call at the end of the day. I think it was a Friday. All set to go home, have dinner and all that with my wife. And one of the engineering managers said, have you seen the video or heard that the shuttle took a hit of a projectile on the left wing? And I gasped. I said, no. I said, well, it's coming out now. It's on a video and we're sending you the video. We're sending it out to everybody. I get it. Would you please look at that over the weekend? Because it's a big piece of foam from the external fuel tank. It's an insulation foam. It's about the size of a briefcase. I said, ooh, okay. So I said, and we're going to have to know, a team will be forming to assess this. And shuttle management wants to know how bad this is, if anything. Is it bad? Not? Do we worry about it? Or what? What do we do? I said, okay. I'll do that. I'll look at it over the weekend. Monday or the next week would be the formation of a debris assessment team. Late. It wouldn't meet till Tuesday because Monday was a federal holiday for Martin Luther King Day. So I did not know this, but during that weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, shuttle managers had already been meeting with contractors, and they were getting lots of messages saying everything's okay. This is no big deal. It's not dangerous. We on the debris assessment team, we didn't know this was happening. This was behind the scenes. So they were already, I call it poisoning the waters. They were drinking the Kool-Aid. Remember that metaphor from history. It's, everybody's getting on the same page that everything's okay on shuttle management side, but we didn't know this. So here I am, naive. I don't know much. Friday, okay, I'm not going to go home yet. I go down the hallway or the first floor. I talk to the thermal engineers. I found a couple of them. I said, had you heard the news? They go, oh, yeah, we heard. Wing has been hit. I said, well, how bad can this be? And one of them looked at me gravely. I remember he was Dr. Don Curry. He said, we could lose the vehicle over this. Wow. So those are my marching orders. I'm not an expert in that thermal area or insulation. It's part of my oversight, but they are. If these specialists in my organization are that worried, then I'm worried. And we got to do something. We got to find out. We got to do the right thing and investigate this. So all I did after that, went home and watched the weekend. During the weekend, watched that video. It came on email. I watched it at home with my wife over and over and over and over. And we were both speculating about it. And then finally, Tuesday morning came. We met the debris assessment team. I got to meet the others. Some of them I already knew. They were aerodynamicists, thermal experts, safety people. There were contractors. There were all kinds. Not all NASA. There were some NASA contractors, several, and some were virtual. They were online or listening. All of us were watching the video and speculating. What does it mean? What did it mean? What did it mean? What could it mean? But we did have parameters and data. The video specialists, image specialists, they were in Florida under Mr. Robert Page. He's the Intercenter Working Group chairman. They analyzed video and they said the piece is this big. It's 22 inches long, another shorter dimension, like a briefcase. It's about 1.5 pounds. It's made out of this. We know the density of foam. We know exactly where it came from. And we know the speed at which that it hit the wing, a relative speed of about, it was over 500 miles an hour. Wow, that sounds pretty high. You can calculate the energy of that impact. So watching the video and a little bit of data, there's not much you can do. So we unanimously said, we need more data. The video does not show exactly where it hit. It hit the left wing, but where exactly on the left wing? What material did it hit? Tiles? Carbon panels on the front of the wing where it's very hard and brittle? Did it hit a landing gear door? We don't know. The image is one angle. We cannot determine that. All we know is it hits a cloud of particles, white particles emerges in the video. Is that the projectile foam disrupting, or is that part of the wing disrupting? And it's mixed in there. We didn't know. I said, all right, we know nothing else. Therefore, we all agreed unanimously, we need an extra image, a different angle, an image independent or something else. And I said, so we need, everybody didn't know, well, how do you work this? What's the protocol? We didn't have any procedure. I said, well, I think I know what to do. I'll volunteer to take this request. We're unanimous here. We're all in agreement. And we even talked about maybe how to repair and also how to fly. If we knew the damage site, maybe you can fly it differently to protect the damage site on the way in the searing heat of the atmosphere. So I said, I'll volunteer, but I know what has to be done. We need to go, my organization, to the director of engineering here at NASA, named Mr. Frank Benz. We will then have the meeting. Everybody get out what they want to say. This team, I'll coordinate that. Then we will ask for outside image assistance. That's that email that I wrote. And I was very careful in framing that. Somehow I had this suspicion or innate feeling someone in history is going to read this. I wrote it that carefully. I said, I want to choose my words. I mean, very carefully. This may be evidence for something later. I want to write it. I said, we need to coordinate. We agree that we need this. We unanimously want all this. We need to coordinate, then go to the shuttle managers and mission operations and talk about it. But we got to do the coordination within the engineering disc. I found that, and I put several people on that email and CC'd a bunch of managers. No reply, nothing, silent. It just went into the void. I wish I could have put the engineering director on there too, but I wanted to give them a chance for middle managers to do their job. They said, well, let's have this meeting. Why are you writing that like that? Before we go to the director, we got to talk for about nothing, silence. I wrote other emails. Has the crew been asked to go down below the next deck below? It's called the mid deck. The pilots are up here on the top deck, but you can take a ladder and go down to the pick. There's a hatch. That's the hatch they used to get in and out of the shuttle when you're on the ground, when they're loading them up. They're boarding the craft on the ground, but you never open it up in space. But it has a porthole, like 5 or 6 inches like this, and it's on the left side. See, have we asked the crew to look there and just look at the wing? Well, why don't they look from the top where the pilots have the huge windows? Well, you can't see it. It's blocked. These radiator panels, the wing is just blocked. You can't see it. But from this hatch below deck, the flight deck, you might. I sent it to an engineering manager who was also on that memo I wrote. Silence. Nothing. The investigators call that first missed opportunity. No, nothing. So I'm waiting. Later, we meet Tuesday. That was a Tuesday when we met with the debris assessment. Later that afternoon, one of those managers said, well, for your information, the orbiter shuttle manager went to the mission evaluation room, looked in the log, and said, the shuttle program is not requesting any images or pictures at this time. When I read that, it infuriated me. It upset me. I said, it sounded like our request had been read and it was turned down. I learned later that was not the case. It's this group, mission evaluation group. They look at data from all the shuttle. They were not asked. I learned later too, after the accident, other managers and other engineers were asking for photos. They were one by one all shut down and sometimes reprimanded. Shut down. I didn't know this. All I knew is that one email I wrote, we're not going to take a photo. I called my manager up and I was very upset. And I said, what? The memo asked to go to the engineering director. We need to have a meeting with him right now. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. You can call him if you want to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be chicken little about this. That was some words that came out. And I know that outside of America, that's a story they tell children. It was in the Disney cartoon. Chicken Little is an alarmist. It's a little chicken on a farm and a piece of debris or something hits him on the head. He thinks the sky is falling. Well, all the animals think, oh, he's so silly. Anything scares him. He has no credibility. He's just scared. He's scared. So that manager was characterizing all the time. I'm not going to be Chicken Little. So he fell into what I would learn later is called the prove it's unsafe mentality. Other managers were going to give us that speech. You see, they didn't call it that necessarily, but they would say, in order for us to do something extraordinary, like go for an image or extra assets that the military has or whatever, you're going to have to prove it fails. We engineers know you can't do that. You don't have enough information, especially when you have hardly any information. We did not know the damage site, the extent of the damage, if there was any, the propagation of damage to other critical areas. We knew nothing, hardly anything. But that was the message. You have to show that. And I went to my own manager in my own department. I explained the whole thing. I must have been quite animated and raising my voice and waving my hands. And he said, calm down. And he gave me the prove it's unsafe, that you have to show it's bad. Oh, God, another one. See, I didn't know this was a systemic phrase that they were saying. But it was to become infamous in the reporting of this, the investigators. Prove it's unsafe, prove it's unsafe. Can't do that. What we engineers do in our profession, in our culture, engineering culture, is you show it's safe enough to fly or operate. We have standards, design standards, performance standards, safety standards. You test and validate. You show it has enough goodness, performance, resiliency, robustness to operate and fly. And it's especially crucial when it's got human life involved. You don't go the other way around. When something extraordinary happens, prove it's unsafe. Why can't we just continue? You didn't prove it's going to fail. That's extraordinarily hard. I also was to learn that this category of damage, if there were damages, damage tolerance. A spacecraft like the shuttle, all spacecraft are like this, they're almost perfectly designed for their environment. We have to save weight. It's not like building a bridge in civil engineering where you could use a factor of 10 or 100. You are flying with the slimmest of margins. And like one manager said at headquarters, Mr. William Gerstenmaier, he said, spacecraft are always operating on the edge of failure and destruction. Even when it's good, you're right to the edge of destruction, because the slightest change of aerodynamics or the way the engines are performing can lead to disaster. We have to do that with spacecraft because the spacecraft have to be very, very lightweight. Otherwise, we can't get the crew to orbit. You can't get cargo and payloads. They won't fly. It's too heavy to fly. So you have to go right to the edge, and it's a dangerous edge. Hence the need for test verification and verification of our mathematics, the models and designs and all that. We give and take. Yes, we can give and take. It's not absolute. But there we were. And what we were told is what I experienced is all of us did in the debris assessment team. Our management everywhere has abandoned us. The lack of psychological safety had set in. There's no further avenue to recourse. You can't protest any higher. Oh, it's possible. We could have gone to a safety organization and all that, but I guess a lot of us are trying to keep this in-house where we know what we're talking about. We're using our engineering expertise. Yes, you could go outside if you wanted to and file a safety concern or whatever, but again, I think we would have run into, how do you know it's unsafe? You go to a safety yard to report something is unsafe, but you don't know it's unsafe. You don't know. Well, that's right. We didn't know. And I'll note this too. In the original email, when I said outside agency assistance, a lot of people will interpret that, well, you mean the military or it could be. I left it open deliberately. It could be amateur astronomers. It could be a university observatory. It could be another country. It doesn't have to be a military asset or military spying assets. It could be, but I wanted to leave it wide open and flexible so we could talk about it. More was to come, and this was the hard message that came down. There's not a photo. We're not going to talk about that anymore. But you guys on the debris assessment team, all of you, the 37 of you, will produce an assessment, a formal presentation to tell us, and you have 2 days. It was met on a Tuesday. You will deliver it on Thursday. Oh my gosh. So the Boeing subsystem manager for load, stress, and dynamics, he was distressed too. He said, Rodney, the only thing we can do is make reasonable assumptions and produce an analysis. If we don't know the damage, we can just assume, make reasonable. What does reasonable mean? What if it's horrible? Well, what he meant was, if you make an assumption that makes it, I just have a tool here to predict it just blew a hole and it went 3 feet into the structure. Can't show that. We'll be thrown out of the room. Again, it's prove it's effect. You don't know it's that bad. How dare you make an assumption like that? So he tried to make it minimize, reasonable, scooping of the tiles. It scoops out a little crater or scooping out some and damaging something else. And he said something too about the brittleness of what they call the carbon panels. There was a little bit of data saying ice, tests with ice said it's brittle, it's hard and all that, but not at 500 miles an hour, not with a piece of chunk this big. No, there was no data. But he made some reasonable assumptions there. And I'm part of that presentation. I looked at it. I didn't know what to say. Otherwise, we were told you got to prove it's unsafe. Otherwise, assess it without catastrophic damage. So we did. It's highly flawed. The presentation does say there's lots of high uncertainty in this analysis. And it's scattered through the presentation. It's a Boeing company. What we should have said on page 1, the following analysis and assessment utilizes assumptions about possible damage. And we make statements about it. But we cannot say and never can say that it represents reality. We don't know the actual damage. This is a case out of many that could be possible. This is one example where the damage is modest, but we really don't know. Now, the Boeing presentation is trying to say that, but the investigators just cut it apart later. They were highly critical of it. They said it was highly misleading. It wasn't stress the uncertainties enough. The tools we use and assumptions were bad. Yeah, they were. I admit all that. So I can go on with this narrative, but do you want to pause and ask me something else? Or, I could keep going, but...
Hello everyone! If you are studying about safety culture, leadership, risk perception, I would like to recommend my books. They are available in Amazon.com, and each book is an experience to go deep diving in safety culture, and I think will add value in your journey.
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. I'm curious to get to the bits, and we'll cut some of this out, that me talking now probably, but there's so many factors that you've been talking about, and I'm sure that the listeners on the podcast here, especially those who are engineers or work in an operational type of role, and even safety people as well, can really resonate with them, because you've got situations about outsourcing, using contractors, time pressure, and then, as you were talking about as well, just the whole way that decisions were made, and perhaps I don't know the right word, but whether the team that you were on felt that you could actually say what was going on, or as you were talking about, saying something was reasonably, what was the word you used?
Reasonable assumptions, reasonable engineering assumptions.
Reasonable assumptions. Yeah, reasonable assumptions. And yet that information did go into the report. Do you think that were the decisions that were made afterwards, or as a result of the report, do you think the decisions were already made? And feel free to not answer that if you don't want to. I guess the point that I'm really curious about is, when highly experienced experts come together and they have concerns about things, and the way you were also expressing your concerns, at what point does leadership in an organisation know which way they should go with their decision making either? In other words, do they defer to safety? Do they defer, to operational needs?
Well, there's a lot of facets in your question there.
Yeah, sorry.
I think, this is just pure opinion, shuttle managers were waiting to hear what our debris assessment team was going to present. Is there anything new that the debris assessment team will reveal in their assessment? The answer is, once we gave it, no. It had that overly minimized assumptions that didn't go to a bad answer, a terrible answer. Okay. No safety of flight issue was stated in there, based on the reasonable assumptions, which are I know now, are highly flawed. So I think, my opinion is, I think that told managers, whew, what a relief. The people that were briefing us before this meeting were right. These experts in the tiles and carbon panels, they think nothing was wrong. They thought nothing was wrong. And we can keep going forward. That's the answer we want to hear. What's missing in all of that, and I learned later, is it's that term, I'm going back, damage tolerance. When you damage a spacecraft, it now is subject to many interactive effects that you don't know about. It can start harming other critical systems, not just heat, not just a burn through, many things. Our Boeing manager said if it gets too hot, maybe it won't melt the wing, but that wing spar, it's a beam inside it. It could melt, and the wing could start warping, and you can't fly it. You have a warped wing. It didn't fall off necessarily. Later, a landing gear specialist, the landing gear main tires are folded up like an aircraft inside that wing ball. If hot air goes inside because of a breach, the tires, which are already at high pressure, 300 pounds per square inch, the pressure because of the heat will soar. The tires could explode, and they're bombs. They'll blow the wing right open. So you have concerns from people like that. So, or cascade failure, this fails, then the whole wing starts unzipping and coming apart. And that's probably what actually did happen. And I've seen the reconstructions of what really had, it did start unzipping and one cascade failure after another, one thing after another. So we were naive. We were experts, as you say, but not in damage tolerance. I now know today, if you get into some kind of extraordinary damage of a spacecraft, you need the right tools, the right laboratories, the right instrumentation, and you need the crew involved. That's what we left out. We never told the crew on Columbia about the severity of this. We kind of told them it was okay. We meaning shuttle management through the mission operations, told them there's an analysis, everything's been cleared, we're okay. I'm embarrassed to even tell you about this. That's what a mission operations person told. But I now know we should have it like Apollo 13. Everybody's looking for the solution, including the crew. They're part of the solution too, and solution finding, and listen to their ideas. And I said, you don't have the right tools, analysis tools. You make them up. You get experts from all NASA, everywhere, universities, private industry, the Russians, anybody, laboratories, anywhere, not just where we work here in Houston, laboratories everywhere. Open it up. We're in danger here. Got to get the crew down. You'll find a lot of people will volunteer. They'll open up for that. They want to help. They will. But I don't know, we were tightly constrained then, like that we're still stuck in the prove it's unsafe and other intimidation factors that were operating at that time. And what adds to that, it's easy to be angry at shuttle managers and say, well, they may, in hindsight, they said this, that was a wrong decision. I could not fathom, and I still cannot to this day, why our own engineering management, from the engineering director and his middle managers all the way down to my organization, all gave up. They will not support us anymore. The contractors found that true for them too. United Space Alliance and Boeing. They were told, shuttle management's not interested in photos. We're not going to get them. Stand down. Quit talking about it. And one of those United Space Alliance managers was very ill at home. He was telling his own people, are you going to get a photo? Are you asking shuttle? They said, well, we did ask and they're not interested. And he said, not interested? Now, he was sick and it turned out dying at home. These visitors were visiting him to pay respect, just to visit him as a comrade. But as they were leaving, he said, well, if we lose the shuttle and the crew, I hope you can live with yourself. I heard that as hearsay. And I heard that from a very reputable source. A former engineering director was there and heard that and told me. So there was concern, NASA and contractors, and there were people asking, but all shut down. And the commonality is management is telling us stand out, either explicitly or by implicitly. You don't have to worry about this anymore. Quit working it. The decision's been made. That is very puzzling.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. And then I was wondering, were they under pressure as well?
All of NASA was an entire agency because Columbia was not a space station mission. It was not delivering cargo or assembling part of the assembly of the station. It was a kind of an awkward science mission, where to launch. The year before, in 2002, it was scheduled. Then we found cracks in the propulsion system, the entire fleet. They said, we have to ground the fleet. We have to fix these cracks and all that. And it delayed space station assembly. These cracks had to be, all of the shuttles had cracks, all of them. We fixed them, and we fixed them correctly. But now the program was behind schedule. And this is what I read about. I didn't know this at the time. I was kind of aware of it, but read later. Space Station Node 2 was critical, and it's behind. And Congress is threatening to cancel it. Space Station is overcost, behind schedule, and NASA is having problems launching. We're getting further and further behind. So let's speed it up. There was pressure. Come on. What can we do? I'll tell you this story. Around November, December 2002, this is, the accident was still 2 months in the future. Structures, United Space Alliance engineer said, Rodney, I want to tell you something. We've discovered damages by inspection and we fix them. The flow liner cracks, this, that. My managers are asking, can we just do less inspections? And I said, wait a minute, what do you mean? He said, we keep looking so hard and we find stuff that's broken or cracked or whatever needs fixing. They're asking, can we just defer those inspections, not look for stuff? I said, why? He said, because it causes delays. And I'm like, I can't believe that's your management saying that. Where are they getting this from? Is it NASA headquarters?
I would like to stop here now and ask you about, at this moment, how you describe the safety culture.
How do I describe it?
Yeah.
I'm saying, I think NASA...
Because I think we have a safety culture before the accident and after the accident, right?
Well, I don't want to put our engineering culture in with the management culture. The management culture at the very top that runs schedules, budgets, money, how they allocate resources to the different asset center, they were under pressure, congressional pressure. So there's also the history of running shuttles successfully after Challenger, that got fixed. The idea was privatization. This is of a operational vehicle like an airline. They started, upper management was thinking, it's like an airliner. We inspect it now and then. We look for damage now and then. But these companies that will run it, they're going to do a good job because it's like an airline. We're doing real well. And they can run it more efficiently because our engineer, we NASA engineer, we're too conservative. We're too worried. We're always scared, all that. We slow things down. The companies will accelerate this. So they thought it was safe. They thought it was safe and okay to do it. It was an airliner. Now, our engineers in my department, they said, hell no. Every time we fly, we find anomalies. Every time we fly, we find a surprise. Every flight. Sometimes they're minor, and others were bigger. But there's no perfect flight. It just needs loving care, attentive care. And some of our engineers for privatization, they wrote, I remember one guy wrote an email to all of us. He said, I can no longer vouch for the safety of the shuttle fleet. You're handing us over to the gun. I will not be part of it. We're headed to an awful accident or something. I cannot vouch for that. I thought he was going to get in trouble. No, they just ignored it. Management just said, that's him. Let him blow some steam. Other people, you have to sign transition papers. Like, I'm a specialist in this field, like windows or landing gear. So sign this paper for shuttle program. I acknowledge that United Space Alliance will take over this, and then we're going to be okay. The knowledge transfer, the data, and all that. Some of our engineers said, "No, I am not signing." They refused to sign. Now you'd think, well, they're going to get in trouble. No, shuttle management just ignored it. No, we're going to do it anyway. We don't need your signature. It happens anyway. This is a top level.
Rodney, one of the things I think you're talking about here, and I think others probably might even see it in the context of their organisation, is different risk tolerances between different parts of an organisation. So on one hand, tell me more about that, and how does that impact how you even keep operations going when there's such a different risk tolerance?
I think there's truth to that risk management, risk tolerance can exist at different levels. The higher up one goes in I'm talking about a complex system like Space Shuttle. It's very, very high risk, very finicky. It needs loving care. It needs expert knowledge and testing and everything. But if you have a string of successful launches and it starts creating the illusion that the top management, that it's robust, that it can tolerate much more and doesn't need that kind of exquisite technical oversight. So the more successes you have, the more that belief is vindicated. But I also find there's fallacies or beliefs that are not true about engineering. I heard this numerous times at NASA meetings. It's probably the contractors too. Engineers are overly conservative. They design these spacecraft and parts. They put in these factors of safety and factors of uncertainty and this and that. They overdo the test. They're too severe. They put worst on worst conditions and test the hell out of it and all that. When you add it all up, it's got a lot of robustness and tolerance. That's not true. there are very fragile areas and areas that where the points of failure, the margin is very small. The other is you can't, I even heard managers talk about this a few years ago. You can't give engineers too much money or too much time. They're like children in a candy store. They can't make a decision. You give them time, they'll use it all up and want more. You give them too much money, they'll waste the money because they want more. They're like children. I resent those kind of remarks, and we did too. One day I wrote them all down. They said they believe this about us, this about, and sometimes if there's a problem at a meeting, a manager might say, "Well, what do you think?" And all that. Well, the engineer might say, "Well, I think we ought to do more," and this, and we don't have enough margin for that. Some managers would say, they do have margin. They have it like an ace, like you're playing poker. I've got an ace hidden in my pocket. I've got that factor of safety. They got all these factors built in there. They just don't want to admit it. Engineers are just way overly protective.
Hello everyone! If you are studying about safety culture, leadership, risk perception, I would like to recommend my books. They are available in Amazon.com, and each book is an experience to go deep diving in safety culture, and I think will add value in your journey.
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
It's possible to find a balance in this risk tolerance.
Yes, right. And the investigator said you have an open communication. Your project manager should have a lot of freedom where people can voice their concerns through the design process and through the operational process. Sometimes there's a change. Sometimes there is a relative amount of freedom during the design process. But once it's operational, okay, stop. We're operating. That's a different world now. The world has changed. You already did the procedures. You already tested. You're already through with all the analysis. Now let us managers operate the darn thing. Let it run. There still can be problems. But there's filtration that goes on. Sometimes problems are discovered in a test or analysis. They get put in PowerPoints, and this was pointed out in a report. It goes up. The language is now weakened until finally it gets to the top manager and says, "I don't see any problem in this PowerPoint. It doesn't say anything is wrong." Well, it didn't start that way. That filtration, sifting out language, it's too scary or whatever, or somebody editing this didn't agree with it. That happens too.
We call this as an illusion of conformity. So how are they facing this after the accident with the investigation?
Yes, I like that term, the illusion of conformity. It's to be a force fit. We don't want to alarm the top management, because that will cause us to have to stop and do something. And they do some risk scoring. That call it stoplights. Like, I don't know, you see there's a little matrix of squares. It's green, that means, oh, you're good. Low risk and little damage. If there's a little problem, it's okay. It can still keep going. Yellow, oh, you're crossing the line. It's the damage could be significant, but the risk is modest. Red is an alarm. Red is that. Likely to happen, and it's very damaging. Red. Well, guess what happens in risk scoring? There's a lot of resistance to coloring a square in it. Lots. They do lots of argument and rationalization. Don't color it red, because if a manager sees that, I have to stop everything. I have to give that attention, and I don't have those resources, and so everybody, it's as if we try to take care of the leader. don't get him or her alarmed, So sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Today, we have a concept, embrace the red and challenge in the green. I know you are retired, but when you look in the organization, do you think we are done for that? Embrace the red and challenge the green?
Is the question about today's atmosphere?
Yes.
Today,
Business atmosphere, not just NASA or...
I retired from NASA and I still saw problems. I was still writing alternate technical views. I was still running into argument and intimidation sometimes. That period right after an accident where everybody's raw, sometimes remorseful, sometimes, there are a lot of resources to fix what happened. It evaporates and becomes something else. I see that management or organizations sometimes keep the words, well, we're still going to have a technical authority. We're still going to have chief engineers like I was. Oh, we still have them. What do you mean? We have all these safety courses we have. They're mandatory. Columbia, Challenger, the Apollo 1 fire. They're there. Go read them. But you say, well, I think there's some echoes from the past coming here. Oh, no, don't say that. Or I would be at meetings and I said, I'm feeling intimidated here a little bit. Everybody's ganging up on me. And a manager would say, no, don't say that. We're not doing that. Like, well, I think I'm the one who decides that, not you. So it would happen. And these titles that they retain from the old chief engineer, technical authority, they tended to be given to people in higher positions. But they still have this stifling protocol. They don't invite any democratic process. They go to these project meetings and listen to the woes of cost and schedule and other things, and the contractors. And our company's having trouble. That's not a very large audience of technical experts. Oh, it's a large audience, but they tend to be a bureaucratic audience, not the technical experts. I didn't see a lot of solicitation and we don't train that anymore. I was a chief engineer and I was also the technical chair of the Space Shuttle Loads and Dynamics panel. I learned how to do that from my mentors by working a lot of problems and exposing myself to many, many different kinds of problems and working them with others. We don't train that anymore at NASA. It's they get experience. Yes, they do. It goes around. But to do what we call integration, systems engineering, how does this system A interact with B, with C, and this, that is very weak, and NASA's hurting for that right now. Now, if you ask management this, they'll say, why are you saying that? We have system engineering and integration, but that's not what not the specific technical stuff I'm talking about. They're looking at budgets and schedules and resource allocation. And maybe they find out a few more things, but I think that's the old days. Where we had the last of a true system engineering and integration was the Constellation program. That was President Bush, and I thought it had a good, strong SE&I, we call it. And it was canceled by another president. And then NASA said, we'll never do that again. There were too many in that organization. That was a big waste of money. So SE&I, or systems integration, is very, very small now. And it's filtered. In my view, it's a filtered little group. And a lot of outsiders can't see what's going on in there. They report to management at night. And you can also say, this is also true, engineers are working very hard at all levels on their little projects, but they don't get to see the big picture. That's what's missing. I don't want to ever imply that our engineers are not working out. They are. In the little pockets and projects that they're working, they are working very hard, sometimes overworked. They're getting wonderful results. I'm talking about the big picture of experts independently looking at all the pieces as a whole. I think NASA's suffering from that, and said we'll never build up a big organization like that again, like we had in the shuttle or Constellation program. We're never going to be that again. Everyone integrates themselves. That's the fallacy I heard years and years ago. All the projects will integrate themselves. That does not work. They work their own systems. They don't want to cross the fence and say, "How are you doing over there?" "Well, we're doing fine." "Oh, well, I guess everything's fine." "How about where we meet together at the same juncture? How do we know that's okay?" "Well, I guess we'll find out when we fly, right?" I don't, it needs improvement.
Hello everyone! If you are studying about safety culture, leadership, risk perception, I would like to recommend my books. They are available in Amazon.com, and each book is an experience to go deep diving in safety culture, and I think will add value in your journey.
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. This conversation about spacecraft and space exploration is so interesting. And clearly it's right on the edge of very complex systems and things that human beings are trying to do. Yet, we're now 3/4 of the way nearly through 2025. And to me, it feels like there's so much complexity going on in the world. I'm wondering, what learnings would you have or want to share with folks, as they themselves are trying to navigate through really complex organizations, sometimes in a lot of chaos as well?
Yes, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how it plays out. My opinion is, I think there's private companies that have learned very well about how to make rocket engines, propulsion systems, maybe the environmental control. That does not mean they know how to land on the moon. I've already been hearing some former colleagues of mine say some huge thinking and error about what happens when a rocket engine is approaching the lunar surface, the disturbance it causes on it, the craters. The engine can create a crater that the spacecraft falls into. And it built the crater from its own engine. And some companies said, we didn't think of that, or that it would be disturbed that much. There's a lot of improvement that still needs to be done on spacesuits. That's not necessarily that's not matured yet. You can over design the suit, and it's way too massive and heavy and too complicated. But that's a challenge. Companies are trying to learn how to. I was one of the last things I was working on is helping with that project. Is spacesuit is a spacecraft carrying one person. It has to be reliable and robust, but it's also challenging. We can't make it too heavy. But what if you trip and fall and hit a rock? Your backpack, it's full of machinery and pumps and batteries. If it hits a rock and then it stops working, you could die. You may not make it back to the spacecraft. They know that, but that's the challenge going on right now. How do I make a spacesuit with enough lighting? Because they're going to the South Pole, a lot of countries, the lighting there is terrible. You have long shadows. You ever driven down a highway with the sun in your eyes and you can't see? That's the way it is at the South Pole. If the sun, you're looking at the sun, it's blinding. You lose your peripheral vision and your sense of awareness. Shadows on the moon look inky black. The air does not diffuse the light. So if you look at a shadow, you don't know if it's 1 inch, 1 centimeter, or is it 6 meters deep? Is it a slope? Is it a hole? Or is it just a gentle slope? You don't know. You can't. this looks black. I'm looking like at black velvet. I can't tell. So you need to put a light in there. Well, how do you do that? You got to carry the lights on your suit and so on and so on. So there's lots of aspects of designing landers, rovers, and contingency things like rescuing of an incapacitated astronaut. They're in danger. How do you do that? They're discovering this right now, but in the midst of chaos and reduced budgets, how do you get there? What I'm afraid of for NASA, and I don't work there anymore, I might get a part-time job one day with I don't know, is I'm afraid of throwing too much money into projects like this, and the pressure is make it happen, make it happen. That's kind of what happened with the Apollo 1 fire. Apollo was not short at money. They were short on time. We got to make it by the end of the decade. Got to do it. Well, they were making mistakes along the way. Hot money, hot bird, make it happen, make it happen. Please, the Congress, please, the administration, make it happen, make it happen. I'm afraid that of shortcuts and not enough testing getting done and all the problems put to rest and the risk managed right. You can have too much money and little time to make it happen for the wrong reason. So how does this play out? I don't know. Other countries and companies are going to the moon anyway. Even if the United States falters or slows up, Russia, China, and private companies are going. They're going. They'll make mistakes. There'll be a fatality. Hopefully they'll learn from this.
I would like to explore if you agree in lessons learned and how to do this process effective.
How
using
to do?
your experience, yes, how we can do this effective, the lessons learned process.
I would take the lessons learned as spelled out in the formal reports of Challenger, Columbia, and Apollo 1 and really put them to use. I would make a strong systems engineering and integration group and have to be trained correctly by having experience. The organizations must have enough resources to train them in multiple areas to see how things interact. They have to meet other people and other disciplines that are not necessarily their own, but you learn from the others. That's what happened to me. I learned from flight controllers, from aerodynamicists. That's not my area. From thermal, for fracture. I didn't want to pretend I was their expert. I listened to them and learned their vocabulary and saw how to work with that for a common test. We need that rather than isolated projects. We need more of an integrated process of technical know-how, how the whole interacts with all of its pieces. Now, you need money? Yes. You need the right resources? Yes. We call it lowballing when they say we want this contract, so this often happens, about this. Companies will say, we're bidding for this contract, we'll meet all those requirements, so they bid an artificially low price. Then when they get it, they'll say, well, we've had some problems, so we need what they call a delta increase. We've had unexpected problems, but that's okay. We're in it. We got pulled in. We're in it. They're not going to get somebody else. They got to give us more money for this. I wish we wouldn't play those games.
And according to your experience, I would like to listen with you today about how you can separate a blame organization as an accountable organization.
That's tough. I don't know. See, the only way I can try to approach accountability, blame, or responsibility for this or that, it's mostly hindsight, after the fact. Something's already happened. So it's much easier to say, well, I now see the train of events and it should have happened this way or that way. I want to trust that engineers already know what to do and what should be done. There is a difference in thinking and culture, I suppose, is when one reaches a certain level of management, because now you're worried about cost and schedule and company image, for one thing, progress. One of my colleagues said, when you get too highly promoted, this was her cynicism about it, and it was based on her experience. She said, if you enter a management at a certain level, you have to get a management lobotomy. The part of engineering, they have to open your skull and scoop out some of the engineering that's too conservative. It's always too worried. Oh, we need to do more. We didn't do enough testing. All that. You lobotomize that part and go. So they now say, oh, well, I think we're okay. That's an accepted risk. See, that's manager talk. I don't need to see any more data. I don't know. I'm good. We need to get rid of that language too. I've seen that too. Manageable poll room. Are you good? Are you comfortable? That's not engineering talk. No professor said that to you, taking an exam. You good with this answer? You okay? You comfortable with this? And no, what is the answer in physics and engineering? They ask qualitative things. And the danger of that is, if you see that going around the room, I'm comfortable, I'm good. I said, ooh, I'm not. The psychological impacts come in. I'm the oddball. I'm the odd one out. I may be wrong. I'm going to look stupid and sound stupid, or too something, too afraid, too risk averse. That's another management term I would hear. This was after Columbia. They'd say, return to fly. We need to get flying again. And their managers are thinking engineers are just too risk averse. That's not our job. Managers accept risk. They should be informed of risk, fully informed, hear everything, then make a decision. Yes, they have the prerogative to move forward and make a decision, but they must hear everything unfiltered. They do not accept risk for management.
It sounds like it might be helpful for leaders to ask different questions.
Yeah.
So if we were able to play it out again, what would be those different questions that leaders should be asking?
Mm-hmm. One of them here is who feels uneasy here, or thinks we have not done enough. Get some responses. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that comes forward. No. What makes you say that? You're not what? What's your experience? Why are you saying that? And you just air it out. Everybody gets to talk and invite it, because some of the chief engineers today they don't solicit that kind of forum of openness. They're stuck in the project offices listening to managers talk. And there's not enough expertise, represented in that room. I have a white paper. It was written by a guy years ago, and it says everything like I'm saying here. He concluded the chief engineers and technical authorities are not affected. They're chosen for their resumes. They look and sound good, but their offices are too close to the project managers, too close. They don't ever get out of those meetings. They don't go out and really talk to real engineers. It's not effective. I conclude it's not. And I said, oh, what a paper. And I sent it to one of the administrators, the acting administrator years ago. He said, thank you. As you know, I'm retiring, but I'll give it to my steering committee. Well, the steering committee is the death knell of a paper. In my view, they won't take an action. To take extraordinary action requires management decision. The committee won't do that. In my view, they won't.
Though, I have hope that the world is changing. And actually, Andreza and I have talked quite a bit about this, including with other guests, which is the impact on generational change. And I've got 3 Gen Zs, trying to make sure I get their generation right. And one of the things I'm learning about them is, this is an N equals 3, but, there's probably good papers written about different generations as well, is that the Gen Zs and the As, as they'll come into the workforce, that they do want to collaborate and have conversations and discussions about things.
They do.
Yeah.
See, I didn't address generational cultures. I didn't address that. I'm just talking about entering a hierarchical organization with like a pyramid structure. what they enter, what they get, how they get programmed or modeled behavior in that. But the youngsters today, the early career, they're wonderful, much better than we were. They're diverse. They're all colors. They're all orientations. They're
They ask
civilian.
great questions.
They ask great questions. They're curious.
Yeah.
I don't detect the smoking is gone. I mean, I don't know what they do outside the building, but no more smoking. Nobody talks about it. The good old boy network of being talking about drinking and alcohol all the time, or everything sports loaded conversations. Those are okay, but the males used to dominate all those things: sports and alcohol and brands of beer and misogynistic comments and making, some racist remarks sometimes. I saw it for years and years. That was not in my vision. Now, can it exist somewhere I'm not seeing? Sure. Can two people that are friends talk in vulgar, obscene ways or make you? Sure. But I don't see it openly. Our atmosphere was very refreshing in an open sense. I was amazed at the wonderful workforce that I left behind. And I mentored a lot of them. It's one of my proudest achievements. I mentored a lot of, and I was giving tutorials at the end. They were being videoed for the future. So video, audio, my presentation were all recorded, put on share folders. So I can get run over by a truck tomorrow and they'll still see the video. So
yeah, how do you think about your legacy, Rodney? Because, you've come and had this experience in life with NASA, being there for so long. And then you've had this experience of so much learning through the Columbia disaster. And then now you're at this phase where you've been mentoring and supporting people in different ways. How do you think about your legacy? I love asking people this question because people think about it in all different ways. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I hope, and I do believe, I've made a positive influence on all the mentorees. I've done it for decades. Some of them will have forgotten my names. So legacy there, it's, well, whoever that guy that mentored me, I forgot his name. That's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of those. I've seen some key individuals turn their life around and become super spectacular. Maybe they'll remember my name, maybe they won't. Now, my legacy, like who was Rodney Rocha? I believe like I'm like General MacArthur, the great Supreme Allied commander in World War II in the Pacific. When he retired, or he told at West Point, I'm an old soldier who will just fade away. I'll fade away. You won't remember me anymore. I think that's going to happen to all of us. It'll happen to me. Now, same time, some will express what I taught them, and they'll make it part of their life, part of their constitution, part of how they do things. Because I stress, tell the truth and empower others that tell the truth too. Support them. And sometimes it's scary. And I've gotten pledges. It goes, yeah, Rodney, we will. That's where I live on, with that effect. They've incorporated that into their being, I hope. That'll go on. I'm mentoring people outside of NASA. I have 3 kids. I mean, I noticed that there were kids, now they're universities. They're all astrophysicists, 3 of them. It's like, I didn't choose them. I kind of accidentally ran into their life. And there's others. So there is one thing that's inanimate that it's a part of my contribution that will live on for a while. I and a team tested some methods on what they call rocket exhaust plume impingement. It's a requirement for all docking spacecraft, commercial, human, no humans. SpaceX has to do it. All countries do it, except China. They assess this using this calculation tool. I named the tool. I and another guy wrote the first code. They still use it. And I've run into people that said, we use that code. Now, I didn't know you wrote that, Rodney. See, they don't know. So my identity will be lost. But they're using my computer code. This calculation thing. And So that's a form of immortality that they're using this calculation method. They don't know who I am. Not necessarily.
Yeah, that's how your legacy lives on, isn't it? It's by your contribution and what you do. But I loved one thing you said as well. I actually just wrote it down. It says, tell the truth and empower others. And perhaps that's the biggest message that I'm hearing from our conversation today. You know, even though you've shared a lot of the constraints and perhaps a lot of the contributing factors to what happened with Columbia, the overriding theme seems to be about telling the truth and empowering others. I love that.
Yes. And yes, thank you. And they will have to find the resources and alliances to keep that up and find the strengths to do it. Then, you know, as I also pointed out, they have to do self-care and don't stew alone. Don't alienate. That's the worst thing that can happen. And I guess one of the biggest things that ever bothered me forever is the crew was never told about this, you know, not in the right way. And you heard the families on documentaries, they really resent that. And to the point where I've heard one of the survivors, she said, my dad, isn't it odd that my father who loved NASA, I grew to hate NASA? That's what she said. How can that be? You know, what does that do to NASA's legacy? You know, have we learned? So where am I invited to give presentations? I've given presentations to interns at work, to other NASA centers, the NASA headquarters, to the Department of the Navy, Department of Transportation, to post office. I've talked to universities here. Like I said, NASA center. What NASA center have I not talked at? The one I came from. Very rarely are they interested. Now, the interns like to hear it, but management would rather not listen to me. Why? It's not the awful thing that happened. It's the aspect of management bad decisions or the way managers acted to suppress or filter information or override information. They don't want to hear about that. It's, I think, human nature. And we'll talk about technical aspects, or we don't want to talk about that.
Well, I think you're also very courageous in how you talk about this, because it does take a lot of guts to do it, especially the way you're sort of segmenting it and calling out different contributing factors with what happened.
I feel
and
more
a lot
free.
of people are scared to do that.
I always wonder why. Many have seen and experienced what I did. And I've asked, why don't you talk? Oh, I can't talk. Or my spouse said, no, it's too embarrassing. That it's too public and the news media will learn it's too bad. That's the reason? Or others like companies like the contractors, Boeing, United Space Alliance, and other, their companies of don't you dare talk. We're facing lawsuits. And so that's powerful. But a lot of people, they saw it, what happened. They agree with me. A lot of them agree with me. They just are uncomfortable talking. They can't speak. And I said, what? I guess I was, I don't know, fate or something. I'm the one that I just couldn't let it go. I had to talk about it. But I must credit my wife. She said, right after the accident, you were very angry. And I want to lash out. You must not do that. If you do, you'll lose your credibility. She was right. If I got too emotional, too angry in this return to flight, and well, you'll lose your job. And managers want you to get angry so they could say, oh, look, he's lost it. He's a mess now. Can't handle it. Got it. We need a replacement. She said, you've got to be calm and collected and say things measured. Hard to do, but she was right.
She seems pretty wise.
Yeah, she was. She knew that emotions are a good thing, feelings are a good thing, but not in that particular environment of giving a presentation. I had a trick, though, not a trick, but it was a method. Do not answer anger or sarcasm with sarcasm. And I face sarcasm. Then what do you say? The answer is, I don't know what to say. But my technique was this. I get a sarcastic comment like, oh, this actually happened. So you don't feel like this method is good enough here. We've got a big risk. Your colleagues don't seem to have heartburn with this. Why do you? See, that's setting you up like one against the others. The others are wiser or they don't have any problem. So my answer is breathe. A few seconds, collect your thoughts. What's the answer going to be? And I said, well, I think there's a problem. And if you want to hear more, I'll be glad to tell you. And I think there is a problem. Another manager said, oh, colleagues and friends of yours that are engineers agree with you that there's a major issue or risk here. Well, where are they? They're not in the room with you. Like, I was at NASA headquarters. I can't bring a dozen people with me. I don't have that resource. Breathe. I said, they are out there, I assure you. I encourage you to go look for them yourself. And he said, okay, next, what else you want to say? If I answered with a smart aleck remark or sarcasm, I'd be thrown out of the room. Or they'd go, yeah, I knew it. See, he's lost it. He lost it.
Okay. So, Rodney, thank you. Thank you for your message here. You inspire me because, when I starting to participate in an investigation, incident investigation or accident investigation, I try to capture all the learnings about this. And I think because our mission is create this environment, the safety environment for the people return to home. Because when the people don't return to home, this day stay open. I think the day that Columbia accident happened, this day stay open in the life of this family. So thank you for inspiring me. I separate some thoughts about our conversation here about, psychological safety continue to be a challenging. We need to find a way, right? I think we need to work with the middle managers. I think the managers are in the middle. They have a power, but they need to be empowered to talk the truth. So
yes.
When you're talking about risk tolerance is need to be democratic. And, sometimes we try to build a culture in top down, and it's right, but we need to put this construction in a bottom up. The construction is bottom up. The direction is top down, but the construction is bottom up. And this is about how we assume the risk tolerance. And I think the accidents have your own story. All accident has your own story. And thank you to share, because, now when I will start to talking about Columbia, now I'm empowered to talk this story, because when we learn about this kind of accident, we share this information, share this information that we share with us, I think we can avoid different kind of accidents. So
yes.
Thank you. I think this is just some thoughts that I take here, and I'm very inspired. Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me talk and share. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Rodney. I don't have much to add. A wonderful conversation, so many learnings, and it's so interesting when you talk to someone who was there rather than reading a case study about something, because it just shows how real it is. But also my learning out of our conversation today is I think that there are lots of people who are working at the moment who perhaps are going through similar things that you went through, perhaps not to the same extent in terms of an outcome, but really in their day-to-day work, they're experiencing a lot of things.
I heard hospital nurses see me at a restaurant. They saw the documentary and they wanted me. They said, well, come on over and eat with us. Okay. They have the same stories, their hospital management. And I've heard other, it doesn't matter. I was NASA, but this intimidation, hierarchy, and not wanting to hear problems. It's unwelcome news. It's common. So.
Exactly. So I'm sure people who are listening to this, there's so many beautiful nuggets of wisdom and insight and even the stories that you're telling, I think each of us can probably pick up things that resonate with ourselves and our experiences at work and in life. So for that, I also want to say a huge thank you. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're both. Thank you. And thanks again for reaching out. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell, so you'll be notified whenever new episodes are released. See you next time.